Lessons from the AI Analyst, 10 AI features that will revolutionize your supply chain, and how skills shortages are causing transformation delays. Those are just a few of the topics we'll cover here in episode 207 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ground control to make it on.
Hello, welcome to episode number 207 of Transformation Ground Control. This is the podcast that is the tech-agnostic view of digital transformation, including the people, process, technology, and strategy aspects of transformation initiatives. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and we're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach the third stage of digital transformation success. And joining me, as always, is Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
A great show planned, and appreciate having you in the audience here today. We've got a lot of stuff we're going to cover. We're going to start off with some social media questions. We're going to get into some newsworthy topics in the opening segment. In particular, we're going to talk about how 67% of digital transformations are delayed due to skill shortages. And then we're also going to talk about how Microsoft is now joining the European cloud group that originally sued the company Microsoft. So it's kind of an interesting turn of the tide there that we'll talk about in the opening segment. And then later in the show, we'll have our guest, Vinnie Mirchandani, who recently published a book called The AI Analyst, and we're going to talk about lessons from the AI Analyst. So we're going to dive into not only the book itself, but we're going to talk about artificial intelligence and the impact it's having on the world and on enterprise technology. And we'll also talk quite a bit about the convergence of enterprise technology and AI, not only in the context of his book, but also his experience. He's a guy that used to work for Gartner and has been a industry analyst for a long time. So he's got a lot of knowledge to share, not only about his book, but about the enterprise tech and the AI space. So stay tuned for that. We'll have that interview here in just a few minutes. And then last but not least, later in the show, we'll talk about 10 AI features that can revolutionize your supply chain. And in particular, we're going to get into some use cases of how we're seeing AI actually being used in supply chain management and improving supply chains right now. There's a million different ways you could be using AI in your supply chain management endeavors, but we're going to talk about 10 in particular that we think are interesting, that we've seen companies and some of our clients use in their supply chains. But before we get all to that, let's start off with some of the social media questions we received here recently, Darian.
Yeah, the first question today is, what is the top ERP in the USA for energy companies and manufacturing?
For energy and manufacturing, I would give two very different answers depending on whether you're talking about energy or manufacturing. In manufacturing, I'll start there because it's a little bit easier, a little bit more broad. There are a ton of manufacturing systems available, especially because ERP systems were largely built for manufacturing. I mean, that's really where the ERP originated. If you think back to the 80s, and back in the 80s, companies were using something called MRP, and then MRP, which is material resource planning, which was really the way manufacturers were trying to tie together their procurement and their the actual shop floor manufacturing, the warehouse management, just trying to manage all their inventory and their finished products from start to finish. That's what MRP was really designed for back in the day. And then MRP evolved into ERP as we know it today. And then ERP sort of expanded outside of manufacturing into other areas. So the reason I give that quick lesson in history is because there are a ton of options available for manufacturers that are looking for an ERP system. You've got the big three, which are SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, and they all have a ton of manufacturing clients. But then, what's really interesting about the manufacturing space is you've got a lot of other options outside of the big three. You've got a lot of good tier 2 and tier 3 niche solutions. You've got, Epicor and Infor, Decom, Acumatica are just a few examples of some manufacturing focused systems. And then you've got, of course, NetSuite and other, smaller, lower tier systems, although NetSuite's not really a smaller, lower tier system, but they focus more on the small and mid market. So those are just a few examples of the types of systems available to manufacturers. And then if you go even beyond that, if you want to look for a specific solution that's specific to the type of manufacturing you do, then there's other options as well, in addition to the broader, bigger options that I just mentioned. So, for example, if you're a food manufacturer, there's a product out there called Just Food. I think they got acquired by someone recently, so they're part of Aptian, I believe it is. Bought Just Food, which is a food manufacturing focused ERP system that's built on the Microsoft Dynamics platform. So that's one example. You've got Plex Systems, which does a lot with automotive, and I could go on and on. There's a lot of different systems out there that focus on different niches within manufacturing. So a lot of options out there for manufacturers. Energy, in my opinion, though, is a little bit more tricky. I think that's a harder industry to crack as it relates to ERP systems, because you have to, well, first of all, you have to recognize that it's highly unlikely that you're just going to implement one ERP system for an energy or a utility company. They just, the needs they typically have are just so diverse and different in terms of asset management and mobile workforce management and things that manufacturers and other types of companies oftentimes don't have. So that's why you do see SAP, you see a lot of Oracle in the energy and utility space, but you also see companies like IFS, which has a strong focus on enterprise asset management. You also start to see some niche solutions like Maximo that is very common in the energy space. And then for gas and electric utilities, the companies that you and I, Darian, and others listening, the companies we pay our electric bill to or our gas bill to, those consumer facing companies that are the actual utilities, those companies oftentimes have a need for other non-ERP types of technologies that have to plug into an ERP system or bolt on. So things like GIS or geospatial technologies to track where all the meters and the lines and the substations and all basically the infrastructure out in the field. They have technologies that specialize in tracking that sort of stuff. And then you've got outage management and workforce management, things that are fairly unique to utility. So I could go on and on, but those are just a few things to consider and a few examples of the types of systems that organizations might consider for manufacturing or energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's get into this next question / comment. I want to get your opinion on it. It says custom dev is overlooked and is overrated in all but very small number of cases because it's not just the initial investment. It's maintenance and the future proofing that never ends. Only seems worthwhile for single function solutions where nothing appropriate exists. Better choice is to use best of breed and invest in add-on function dev, best of both worlds. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree with that. In fact, I have a forthcoming YouTube video where I talk a little bit about that specific thing, which is, in the video that I just filmed the other day, I'm whiteboarding basically a quadrant of 4 major options you have when you're defining your digital strategy or the types of enterprise technologies you might be considering for your digital roadmap. And, I talk about single ERP systems. I talk about best of breed. I talk about software platforms. And then I talk about the 4th one, which is custom dev. And in that video, there's a whole section on custom dev. And it's actually the first time I didn't realize it until I was filming the video, but it was the first time I've really ever talked about custom development in any of my videos. And it's kind of fascinating because you do tend to think past that option because you always think, well, let's go find something off the shelf and let's go find a system that doesn't require us to recreate the wheel. So it makes sense that, your first instinct may not be to go custom dev, but to this person's point in their question or comment, it's important to note that, ERP systems or best of breed or even software platforms aren't going to give you everything you need. And there's always going to be some gap between which you're able to get off the shelf and what you need to run your business and to be different. I think a lot of times software vendors want to sell you this vision or this expectation that you don't need to be different. You could just be like every other peer in your industry, but that's not realistic to say or think that, because there's a reason competitors are competitors and that they do things differently because they're trying to create their own competitive advantage, and they're trying to compete and be better. So that sort of runs contradictory to the thought of standard ERP systems that work one way with pre-configured industry solutions. It's just not realistic. It's going to be realistic for a big subset of your business, but the question then is, what do you do about that stuff that's your secret sauce, or the thing that makes you different, or the thing that gives you a leg up or an advantage over your competitors? And that's where custom development can be super powerful. And I actually want to get into this a little bit with Vinnie later in the show when we talk about his book, The AI Analyst. I also want to talk about how AI is impacting enterprise technologies. And one of the things that I want to get to is understanding how AI might make custom development more viable again. It used to be a thing, 20 or 30 years ago. It was pretty common for companies to create custom development solutions, but now it has sort of a negative connotation in the space. So I'm curious to hear how the advent of AI and the fact that average people that aren't developers now suddenly can become architects of solutions without having to know how to code. I think AI might change things and change the mindset around custom development. So I agree with what this person says as it relates to today, but I'm also curious to see how things evolve and maybe become more viable for custom development given the world of AI and just changes in technology in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Some great points there. But I want to get into our couple of newsworthy topics of the day. We have some good ones today, starting off with the skills shortage that you mentioned earlier in this podcast. So this first article is 67% of digital transformations delayed due to skills shortages. This new report reveals that IT skill shortages are causing major delays in digital transformation projects, with 67% of initiatives running behind schedule. Emerging technologies like AI are widening the gap, making it harder for companies to find the talent needed to keep up. The key impacts include delays in product development, disruptions to operations, and lower customer satisfaction and lost revenue. So the message behind this article is very clear, and it says that without addressing these skill gaps through reskilling or upskilling, businesses risk falling behind in innovation. Eric, how do you think this will play a significant role into delaying digital transformations, and are there specific areas where companies will fail it the most?
Yeah, I think this is a real issue, and it's something we've been tracking for years now. I think that we're experiencing a sort of perfect storm of strain on technology skills right now. I mean, you think about all the things that are coming together to create this problem. You had COVID a few years ago, which caused a subset of people to just drop out of the workforce altogether. You had COVID, which also slowed down sort of the development and the educational ambitions of many people just because of COVID. So you had that happen, and then when you add on the demand side of things, that's more like what's happening with supply. But then when you look at demand, the demand is increasing for these same skills that we never had enough of to begin with. Now there's an increase in demand because now you've got software vendors that are sunsetting their old legacy products and moving customers to the cloud. And so you have a lot of, call it, artificial creation of demand for digital transformations to happen right now, or at least in the next couple of years. And so that's creating the spike in demand for technical resources that know these sorts of technologies and understand technology. And there's just not enough people to go around. And so you're right. It's causing a slowdown to where not only is there a shortage of skills for the system integrators and the technical implementers, but the companies and the organizations themselves that are going through the transformations, they're having trouble as well. So it's sort of like a double whammy. Not only can they not get the resources they need from their technical providers, but they're also having trouble filling their own internal roles. All that stuff's coming together to create this perfect storm of, a lot more demand than there is supply of these technical resources. So I think it's something you've got to factor into your project plan and your overall strategy and your budget and everything, just to make sure you're being realistic about the realities of the backdrop you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have any strategies that organizations should prioritize to close these skill gaps? Does reskilling exist in the staff, or hiring externally, or leveraging third party? What do you suggest for companies that are experiencing this?
Well, all those things you just mentioned, I think are good ones. I mean, if you could reskill, you can find more outside resources. I think reskilling and upskilling your own team is probably in my opinion, it's the best one because, it makes you less dependent on outside consulting firms, outside consultants, and outside technical providers, to where you can sort of take more of an active role in owning and having buy-in into the overall project. So I'd say, yeah, I do all of the above to help mitigate that risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more question. How do you think that skill shortages will specifically impact ERP implementations? And are there steps companies should take to mitigate these delays?
I think first of all, if I'm backing up even beyond this whole skills shortage thing, I think software vendors and system integrators have always been fairly notorious for creating unrealistic expectations around implementation time and budget. So that was already a problem to begin with. And now when you add to the fact that finding the right resources to actually execute to that time and budget is making it even more difficult, it's fair to say that whatever proposal you get from your software vendor or your technical implementer or your system integrator or whatever you want to call it, it's fair to assume that it is completely underestimated. And you have to go in with that mindset, not to be not to go in with a negative mindset or a overly skeptical mindset, but you do need to be somewhat skeptical. You need to say, hey, I don't know that this is realistic, not only because of the skills shortage, but also because companies themselves just have trouble changing fast enough as it is. And then when you add to the fact that you don't have the skills to execute quickly or quicker, or even if you wanted to, or even if you could, culturally or organizationally, it just creates a number of different headwinds that you're up against. So I think the first thing is to go in with the realistic expectations, to where it's not technically a delay or a budget overrun, because you've planned for it. You've known all along what the real timeline is going to be, what the real budget is going to be, and you can still be aggressive and aggressively manage to those timelines and milestones. But when you go in with unrealistic expectations to start, that just creates a snowball effect of bad decisions downstream, because now you've got to start cutting, you've got to start reprioritizing, and you're never going to finish the product in a time or budget that was ever defined. And so now you're making it worse by adding the lack of skills and resources. So I think having those realistic expectations up front and really knowing what you're getting yourself into is the really important thing.
Yeah, that's some great advice. And I'm sure this is something that we'll continue to keep tracking as the coming months and years. But I want to get into the next newsworthy article of the day. This one is about Microsoft. So Microsoft actually has joined CISP, which is a major European cloud group that has previously actually pursued antitrust legal actions against the company. This move was made shortly after settling those claims, and it has raised a couple of eyebrows, I guess you could say, in the tech world. So Microsoft paid £54,000 to join as a non-voting member, but Amazon, who is already a member of this group, voted actually to block their membership entirely. Despite the friction, CISPE's board accepted Microsoft's application on January 15th. This decision reflects the growing tension and collaboration challenges in the cloud computing sector, particularly as major players like Microsoft face scrutiny over competitive practices. Eric, what do you think about Microsoft's move to join CISPE, and what do you think it suggests about their approach to addressing antitrust concerns in Europe?
Well, I mean, Microsoft has a long history of antitrust issues in Europe, going back to the browser days, back when Internet Explorer was around, and Netscape and some of the browsers from the 90s and early 2000s. There were suits against Microsoft for packaging Internet Explorer in Windows and sort of making it the default browser for new laptops and whatnot. And so the EU sued Microsoft for that. And the lawsuits have continued. I mean, the EU tends to be pretty not rigid, but they tend to be pretty aggressive in their regulatory regime, as far as suing the tech providers. They've also sued Google for similar reasons. So there are similar antitrust concerns. So I think it's interesting now that they are suddenly becoming part of this group, though. I think it just goes to show that, I don't want to say time heals all wounds, but it's sort of like that was in the past, and now hopefully they've changed and addressed some of the antitrust concerns, and now they're more able to join a group like this. So I think that's sort of a natural evolution that's kind of encouraging. And I'm not surprised that Google, by the way, resisted or was against Microsoft joining. That makes sense. That's a natural competitive reaction to that, I suppose.
Yeah. And speaking of, competitive dynamics, can you explain some, I guess, explain some of the competitive dynamics between major cloud providers like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, etc.?
Yeah, it seems like they have like a love-hate relationship. There's areas where a lot of them are collaborating, and there's areas where they're competing. But I think in the tech world, it's just changing so fast that they're having to collaborate more, and then rivalries becoming friendships or collaborations more quickly. And that whole cycle of, to your point about Microsoft joining this group in the EU, things change faster now. In terms of situations and levels of collaboration and whatnot. So I think it's becoming more and more common, especially because even for the big tech providers, it's hard for them to scale as fast as they need to on their own. You think about like all the computing power and infrastructure that's required for AI. I mean, it's just such a mad dash to create these massive infrastructures that it sort of behooves the tech industry to collaborate more. Although the more they collaborate, the more likely they are to get dinged by the EU to say that they're, being monopolistic because they're collaborating. And so you kind of have to walk that fine line of, collaborating and leveraging partners and, doing what's right to create innovation as fast as possible. But you have to do it in a way that's not going to raise the attention of the EU or the US government or any other large regulatory body in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. One more question. Do you think that this case highlights a growing trend of regulatory and industry pressure on large cloud providers?
I think it does. I think that the pressure on cloud providers is going to increase in coming years. I think there's some regulatory stuff that's still to come because I don't think we've truly felt the pain of the downside of cloud in terms of, getting data out of a cloud system or cybersecurity issues. What happens if and when there's a cybersecurity breach amongst one of these cloud providers, and then customers hold those cloud providers accountable for whatever damages might occur. I think there's a lot of legislation or lawsuits and legal matters that'll be worked out on that front. And then also just what I'm really intrigued by and interested by, and I'm curious to see how it unfolds, is a third area of potential regulation or legal issues for cloud providers, which is what happens when, they jack up the prices of their subscription fees to the point that a company can't realistically pay that bill, or they're sort of forced into finding another alternative because it's becoming too costly. Their OpEx costs are going up way too much. And, the software vendor sort of has, sort of a lock on these customers. I'm curious to see what sort of legal actions might come out of that. So I think I think it's going to get messy legally, in my opinion, especially then when you add in AI and intellectual property and confidentiality of data privacy and whatnot. I think all that stuff is a recipe for lots of regulations and lawsuits in the future. So not to be overly pessimistic, but I think there's a lot to be determined legally and regulatory wise in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we're hearing about something new, regulations that come out or get pulled back every single week. It's always changing. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes in the next year.
Yeah. Countries like the US are changing presidents all the time. I mean, it's just confusing. It's hard to keep up with what's going on in the world, but well, good. Well, that's good stuff. Thanks for bringing up those great newsworthy items and the great social media questions. We're going to shift gears though. And here in just a moment, we are going to bring on our guest this week, who's Vinnie Mirchandani. He's an analyst that's been with Gartner, among other places, and he's been in the space for a long time. I've known him for a long time. We've sort of crossed paths for a long time, and he's got a new book out. He's written several books, but his newest one is called The AI Analyst, and we're going to talk about lessons from the AI Analyst. In particular, we're going to dive into not only the book itself, but what it means to the world of AI in general and how AI is affecting ERP. So there's a lot of stuff we're going to cover here in just a few minutes with Vinnie. And then later in the show, we'll talk about how AI is changing supply chains and improving supply chains. So be sure to stick around for that. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you'll want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 207. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. This show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital strategies, their software selection, their implementation planning, as well as their implementation program management and change management as well. So if you're interested in learning more about Third Stage, just go to thirdstage-consulting.com. I've also included links to our website in the description field below in the show notes below. So I'm excited for our guest here, Vinnie Mirchandani, who is an analyst in the ERP space. He's written many nonfiction books about enterprise technology, but this is his most recent book is his first fiction work, which is called The AI Analyst. And so I wanted to have him on the show, not only to talk about this book, because it's not very often that you hear about a fictional book that's about AI and enterprise technology in particular, but also because there's a lot of lessons we can take away here in terms of how AI is impacting enterprise tech and just the overall evolution of enterprise technology. So we're going to talk about the book. We're also going to talk about the industry in general and some of the trends we're seeing as a result of that. So with all that being said, Vinnie, thanks for being here today.
Eric, first of all, thank you so much, and to your audience for joining us today. And in terms of location, I'm coming in from Tampa, Florida. So a little bit different. We don't get much snow like you do in Denver. But
I'm guessing it's a little warmer there.
Us. And, not only talking about the book, Eric, I hope you bring out, what an exciting time we're living in right now, right? I wrote a book a couple of years ago about how in the last 5 years, so many new vertical edge applications have become viable, from telemedicine to reverse logistics to a whole bunch, right? And the rate of pace, it seems like this year, it's just dramatically increased, right? Whatever you may think of Trump, just what he's unleashing, good and bad, is going to change industries, right? The news out of China yesterday, the DeepSeek, the the whole AI world, the cost of AI may dramatically drop as a result. So this is, as an innovation author, this is so exciting. One other point. Thank you. I know you offered to award a couple of winners of the audience today, copy of my book.
Yep.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I'm going to have you introduce yourself and just to talk a little bit more about your background in just a moment. But could you hold up a copy of the book? You've got a physical copy. You were kind enough to give me an e-copy, but could you hold up a copy of the book? It's AI Analyst. We are going to give away 2 copies of this book, either physically or ebook, depending on which one you want. We'll probably do it about halfway through the discussion here today. So stick around for that. But if you're interested in receiving a free copy of the book, just drop the word interested in the chat here, whatever chat you're listening to. And I'm going to pick 2 people at random that will give either an electronic or physical copy book or physical book too. So drop interested in the chat if you're interested in being part of the informal drawing that we'll do for the free copies, the 2 free copies here today. But before we jump in and discuss the book AI Analyst and sort of what it means and how it relates to today's world of technology and all that rapid pace of change that you're talking about, it's a very timely time for you to be releasing this book and for you to be discussing it here today. But tell us, before we get into the book, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. You and I have known each other for a long time and sort of circled in the same space here for decades. But tell us a little bit about yourself for those that don't know you.
Oh, absolutely. So currently, I run a firm called Deal Architect, which is partly an analyst firm, partly a consulting firm like yours. We advise both vendors and buyers, and partly a publishing firm. So I've written a blog for 2 blogs for 20 years, written 10 books. This is my 10th book that I'm releasing. So it's partly advisory, partly analyst, partly publishing, right? Before that, I was a Gartner analyst for 5 years. And I was part of the group that coined the term ERP. And, we saw the Y2K momentum that ERP had. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. And then before that, I was at Chwialkowski, partly as an implementation consultant around the world. But then they asked me to set up a small research firm, internal firm, kind of a little Gartner group inside. So I've been an analyst in total about 30 years, in different forms. So,
right, yeah, you've been writing and studying the space for a long time now. I'm
dating myself. At Pricewaterhouse, it was client server technology. Then, as I started Deal Architect, the whole cloud world was taking off, the NetSuites and so on. And then now, obviously, it's all about agentic AI and robotic humanoid robots and so on. So I am, I've been very blessed to see a lot of change in the world and in the technology sector.
Right. Yeah, that's a lot's changed, but a lot hasn't changed. And I think we're going to get into some of that here today, the things that haven't changed. But before we get to that, tell us a little bit about what led you to write a fiction book. And because I'm familiar with your work as more of a nonfiction author and writer, but what inspired you to write this particular book?
So, I'll give credit to my co-author. This is also, not only is it a fiction, my first fiction, but it's also my first co-authored book. So my co-author, Kimberly McDonald Baker, is an ex-Oracle executive. Okay. And she and I met at Gartner 25 years ago. And she came to me with the idea. She said, Vinnie, we should write a fiction book. You know the analyst world. I know the technology marketing world. The basic plot is a billionaire Silicon Valley executive disappears. And the analyst has worked with this executive for a number of years and somehow gets embedded in the FBI investigation. So that was the basic plot, right? And we had suspects and so on. Every 5 years, she'd call me up and say, "Are you ready to write?" I would say, "I don't have time," or "I'm not comfortable with fiction," or I kind of push her off. Right. She was persistent. And finally, last November, she said, "Vinnie, we are running out of time." I said, "Okay, I have a little time, and now, with the whole AI, we can anchor it around AI technologies, and the 2 major settings are California and Florida. So much has changed in the last 20 years in these two states. Okay, so a lot of things converge to say, hey, this could be a really fun and not just technology geeky kind of book. This could be a fun book. We can bring out the glamour of Silicon Valley. We can bring out all the excitement around LLMs and GPUs and agentic AI and so on. So a lot of reasons to say let's write a fiction book, but it's grounded in a lot of stuff that's happening in our industry.
Right. So can you tell us a little bit about what's the book about? What are what's the general plot without giving away any spoilers? But what's the general theme and plot of the book?
So 25 years later, two characters are still the same. So Barry Rowan is CEO of a Silicon Valley AI and automation company called Polestar. Okay, Polestar doesn't just do AI; they're also into robotics, drones, UAVs, all kinds of automation, right? So for blue collar workers, for firemen, for farmers, all that. Okay, and so it's different from any software company we follow or any robotics company we follow. It converges all that. In addition, its definition of verticals is very different than what people today say. I'm in the utility sector or I'm in the telecom sector and so on. They define their verticals as every one of the occupations, 800 occupations that the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks. So when they decide to go after an occupation, they really go in and look, okay, if you're going to sell to the firehouse, fire and safety departments, we better have, thermal goggles that these firemen can use. We better have acoustic suppressants. All kinds of STEM disciplines come into play when they decide to go after a vertical. Okay. So it's a next generation vendor in my mind, because they do a lot of stuff that most of the people we cover are only into software, only into IT centric stuff, and they pretend to be vertical. They really aren't. They do horizontal HR, payroll, MRP, etc. The other big character is Patrick Brennan. Patrick is an analyst at a firm called Oxford Research. So he's like an analyst like you and me. I mean, he's covered different markets. Difference is he used to work for Polestar. He worked for Barry for 5 years. Okay, so he knows him very well. In fact, introduced several verticals for Barry. Okay, and so Barry disappears, okay, and nobody knows what's happened to Barry. The FBI thinks he's absconded. In our sector, we are so proud of ourselves. We're ethical and blah blah blah. The FBI's most wanted list, one of the biggest categories is cybercrime. We're actually an industry of scumbags. So their immediate thought is Barry is absconded, right? Patrick gets involved in the search and investigation because his firm has done work for the FBI. Not only do they write research, they have their version of Magic Quadrants. They also have labs that test products, test security, et cetera, et cetera. So they've done work with the FBI. So Patrick, through his contacts, says, I know Barry, if I can help. So one thing leads to another, and he gets embedded in the investigation. Now, what they find is the list of suspects is long. Barry has many enemies. He's going through a bit of divorce, so his estranged wife is a suspect. He's fired several executives. Many of them are suspects. He's botched a couple of acquisitions, and their founders are suspects. Chinese intelligence comes into play because they're interested in his AI technologies. The mob is involved. I won't tell you. I won't tell you too much details, but the mob is involved. Latin gangs are involved. So there's a number of suspects, and Patrick actually helps them go through all that with a co-pilot called Sherlock that they've developed for intelligence agencies, and he helps the investigation actually becomes a key part of the whole investigation, including convincing the FBI that Barry is a fighter. He's not he'll given a choice, he'll pick fight over flight. He hasn't absconded. So that's the basic plot is a search for a missing AI CEO. And it's not just the human detectives, obviously, and Patrick and so on. There's AI involved in the search. There are robotics involved in the search, and so on. So it brings out a lot of automation on how crime enforcement is using technologies.
Yeah, yeah. So, how did your background in being a technology analyst, how did that influence the development of the plot and its characters? Obviously, you're talking about AI and enterprise types of technology here, but what else, in terms of your background at Gartner and being an analyst, how did that help you inform and write the book?
One of the biggest things that we had to bring out of the book was not assume that people know anything about analysts, right? So, because what I found was in the initial surveying, people didn't know what a technology analyst does. They still don't, right? We're a mysterious crowd. They know we're influential, but very few of them know how we come up with our magic quadrants and how we do a surveying and so on. So I had to include some of the history of the industry analyst market just to set the stage on what does an analyst do and point out how influential, not just industry analysts, but Wall Street financial analysts and vendor market sizing analysts and so on. So in the prologue, actually, I have 2 pages that describe, I call it a small but influential club. And, I had to go through that. And then, throughout, I had to bring out, what analysts do and how they do it in the old fashioned way and how that's changing, right? So this firm, Oxford, actually has a co-pilot called Curmudgeon that takes data from Google Gemini and ChatGPT and all that. It also mines Wall Street data. It mines its own query database, right? And then analysts enter into it vendor briefings, vendor event information, and all that. Based on all that, it generates its first version of golden circles, which is Oxford's version of Magic Quadrant. So, it's how the analyst world itself is becoming a little more automated and so on. So, had to factor all that in. But
Right.
the biggest challenge was, like I said, it's amazing how few people know what analysts do.
Right.
You just assume you throw darts and the magic quadrant happens.
Right. Surely. I mean, how hard can it be, right? The audience to drop in the chat if you are interested in receiving a free book or a free copy of Vinnie's book called The AI Analyst, which is what we're talking about here today. Just drop in the chat the word interested, and I'm going to pick 2 people at random who are going to get either an electronic or a physical copy of the book here. And we've got several people who have already commented on being interested. Here's a comment from Ed on YouTube, by the way. Ed says, AI will help humankind to grow, but it can be risky that as humans, we start stopping to analyze the information dropped by AI and we start giving our important decisions to the machines. Is that something you agree with, or did that issue come up at all in the book?
I completely agree. And in the book, you will see the human role, how both the investigators and the analyst, Patrick, do things that no AI would have done. So the blend of man and machine is critical. I mean, in another section of the book, we also talk about automation taking away jobs. And again, Patrick has a perspective on. He gives examples of previous generations of automation. It could be UPC scanners in groceries, or ATMs in banking, and how they didn't completely kill jobs. In fact, UPC scanners increased jobs, right? So in passing, we touch on a number of these topics.
Yeah.
And, but you will see the human factor in this clearly. I mean, both from a logical perspective, but also the humor of having a human involved in any mix and so on. And the negative side of humans, right? We can be evil. So
yeah.
Machines are not by design evil. You can design them to be evil, but by themselves they're not evil. So
yeah,
humans can be a lot more evil.
Well, that's something that fascinates me about AI longer term is the fact that we are imperfect. Some of us are evil. Some of us are, have more biases or imperfections than others. And we're the same ones that are training AI models. So how much does that imperfection and the bias and the flaws we have as humans, I'm curious over time how much of that bleeds into AI, or does AI have a way to purify some of those imperfections? I don't know the answer to that, or I don't know if you do either.
I think we're seeing early signs of that already, right? I mean, I read somewhere yesterday, somebody asked DeepSeek about Taiwan, right? With the Chinese influence, it didn't have much good answers, right? ChatGPT has borrowed so much from mainstream media that it tends to be somewhat left-leaning in its answers, right? So some of that is already happening. I think we learn to, just like we decide between who we want to read, who we want to listen to on TV, we'll make our own judgments on if that is. I hope we don't just accept answers and just say, "Oh, this is God's wisdom for us," right? So I think that's where the human element is going to come in and say, sorry, machine, you're full of shit on this.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Because someone will have to, and I was thinking about that with the whole DeepSeek thing that just, sort of unfolded here as we're preparing for this interview. And I was thinking about that because, China is known for being somewhat more aggressive in its censorship and its control and manipulation of information. So, that might be an extreme example of what happens when that influences AI models. And it's not just China. It's also, like you said, in the US or with OpenAI.
A bigger concern with DeepSeek is like TikTok, right? It is going to collect a lot of data about us, right? And one of the themes in the book is about a major data breach and how vulnerable, not so much web-based data, but more proprietary data, right? Companies have some really, really sensitive data. Oil companies have, seismic data on oil fields. Drug companies have molecular data on pharmaceuticals and so on. You won't believe even before AI became popular, the hacking attempts that are made on their data, and that has only increased because of machines cannot do all this stuff without getting a lot of data for that particular domain, right? So we bring out a lot of the. There's a character in the book who goes, I spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and we used to joke about who put our oil under their sand, right? And then he turns serious and he goes, nowadays we are saying who put our data in their data centers. We pretend like we own everybody's data, right? And so we're willing to hack into it. We're willing to steal it. So we bring out some of the data protection and data ethical issues that I don't think we've publicly talked much about.
Right. Yeah. These are big issues that we've got to work through for sure.
But I don't want to scare the audience off. This is not a geeky book. This is a fun book, fun read. The other thing is also there's a lot of next generation. I mentioned Polestar as a next generation technology vendor, right? That we display. There's a next generation technology buyer in the financial sector that we bring out. We obviously bring out the next generation technology analysts. So as you read it, you will see the world that I'm seeing 2-3 years out, maybe 5 years out. Okay, so it's not just a narrow AI focused book in that sense.
Yeah. That's a great point. And we're getting some general comments here, not just about the book, which in just a second, I'm going to award the 2 free copies here in just a second, based on the people that dropped the word interested in the comments, wherever you're listening or watching here today. But here's a question from Michelle on YouTube. Michelle says, a lawyer used ChatGPT to produce a brief complete with citations. He submitted it to the court. I'm not sure what happened to the lawyer when it was discovered that the citations had been made up. I think I heard that too. I don't remember where that was, but I think I remember maybe there's more than one case or instance where a lawyer had used AI to create a briefing, which I'm sure that's highly frowned upon in the court system, I'm guessing.
I mean, we've got, we talk a little bit about in the book about traceability, right? One of the big things with AI is you need to audit the results. And so traceability of where it's sourcing the data, the citations, and so on is very important. The New York Times has sued OpenAI for mining its proprietary data. They've used articles without paying the New York Times for it, right? So we'll have to carefully navigate the minefields that are opening up with AI and use co-pilots and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. And along those lines, Derek on YouTube has a comment. Derek says, a great point. Discernment is critical when it comes to using these tools and how they play a part in influencing our mindsets.
Not just influencing our mindsets. Derek, that's a good point. But not just minds. From a legal perspective, right? I mean, I started my career at Pricewaterhouse as a CPA. And, you see the annual reports of companies, and there's even a page that has all the summary data, right? We had 42% growth. We had 82,333 employees and all that. Every little data point had to be validated, right? We needed an audit trail for every one of them. That same level of discipline is going to come to corporations to say, don't just accept what you get from your co-pilot or your agent, digital agent, but run an audit trail. Go back to the source and make sure you can justify what you're presenting, right? So,
yeah, absolutely. And then here's an interesting question from Ed on YouTube. Ed says, is there a kind of AI to analyze a business for ERP deployment? This can be interesting to speed up software deployments. So have you seen AI being used for deployments itself?
It can be, and here's how, right? Eric, you and I were talking about before we started about how in many ways our industry doesn't evolve quick enough. And service providers have been especially slow, right? They love to bring teams of people to every implementation, right? I've been challenging them for a couple of years. I go, you've done 1 million ERP projects. You have work plans. You have unit testing plans. You have training modules. You have data conversion plans and all that. Put all that into a big LLM and generate the first version for every client. Why do you have to have human beings come up with each of these, recreate the wheel each time, right?
Right.
And they Vinnie, it's so complicated. But it's because they don't want to. They want to stick to the talent-based, chargeable hour model, right?
Yeah.
That would be so easy to do, and we could get so much productivity from using what we've learned. What worked, what didn't work for the last 20 years. We could apply that get a lot of productivity improvement. I mean, one of the most promising use cases for generative AI is code generation, right? And companies are already doing it. Why can't systems integrators do that, right? So, I mean, there's plenty we can do using AI to streamline and make our implementations a lot quicker, a lot more productive.
I'm here with Vinnie. We're talking about his book, The AI Analyst. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. I've included a link to a video right here that describes Third Stage in a bit more detail. It talks about our story, our history, our philosophy, our clients, our service offerings, and that sort of thing. But in general, what Third Stage Consulting does is we're an independent and tech-agnostic consulting provider. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, a ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 207. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of the show every week by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also see past episodes and subscribe to the podcast by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. I'm here with Vinnie Mirchandani. We're talking about his new book called The AI Analyst, as well as what it means to the enterprise tech space. Let's jump back into the conversation. Well, I'm going to take a moment here and award the raffle here, the two free copies of the book. The first one is going to go to Alcinda on LinkedIn. So Alcinda Moselaar. So we'll be sure to reach out to Vinnie, Alcinda, since you're on LinkedIn, watching on LinkedIn. I've tagged him in the stream there, so you can contact him for that free copy. So Alcinda is going to get a free copy, as is Michelle on, I'm not sure where she's from. Oh, she's joining from LinkedIn. I think she's on YouTube as well. So Michelle Norton from New Jersey is also getting a copy. So those are the two free copies that we're giving out. Be sure to get in touch with Vinnie to claim your free copy, and you can reach out to him. And by the way, while we're talking about it, Vinnie, where's this book available for people that are interested in buying a copy?
The best source is Amazon, and 3 levels of pricing. If you're a what's called Kindle Unlimited subscriber, which you pay a monthly basis, the book is free. It's included in that. At least till March, I've made it available to Kindle Unlimited subscribers free. If you have to buy it on Amazon, the Kindle single copy is $9.99, or you can order a print copy. And Amazon, it's fantastic, the project. I mean, the process is It's a robotic process. They actually take the whole imprint of the book and generate a book specifically for your order and ship it. I mean, within 2 days, you'll have a copy. I mean, it's amazing the whole how easy book, once it's written, book distributions become.
Oh, I know.
So
It is
both Alcinda and Melissa, right? What was the
Michelle.
Michelle?
With
Michelle,
MECHE.
please let me know if you want an e-copy or a print copy. Either way, I'll make sure you get one. Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations, Alcinda and Michelle. Alcinda says, yay, thank you so much. Looking forward to the read. So congratulations, Alcinda. And then Serge is joining from Canada. So thanks for being here, Serge. Well, great. Well, thanks for making those free copies available. And if you didn't win and you're interested in buying a copy, you can go to Amazon to find it there. But just continuing here with some of the questions I had for you, before I do, turns out Michelle is excited as well. So Michelle just said, woohoo, thanks so much. So
Congratulations,
both of you. And thanks for sticking around until the drawing too. That's great that you're still here. So how is this book different from some of the other books you've written, other than the fact that it's nonfiction? I know you've written Silicon Collar and New Technology Elite. How is this similar to or different than other books, other than the fact that it's nonfiction that it's fiction instead of nonfiction?
So I've written 9 books. 3 have been for thought leaders. There are 3 leadership books for C-level executives. Okay, so it's their idea. I just help them turn it into a book because my books tend to be very case study heavy and so on, and I help them with the whole process. Okay, 3 of my books have been very, very innovation oriented. So the New Polymath, the New Technology Elite, and Silicon Collar have covered technology as a grounding principle, but not just IT, but also clean tech, space tech, whole variety of STEAM disciplines, how they make companies more innovative. Okay, and 3 have been in the SAP Nation series. I've written quite a bit about SAP, not because SAP deserves that much attention, but it's a proxy for enterprise software. It's the biggest software company. It has the widest range of global customers. It's got the widest range of vertical offerings and so on. And they're not always positive. I mean, the first book, boy, SAP was really upset with me because I documented the ecosystem around SAP. It's very expensive to implement SAP. It was more of a just showing that, hey guys, you don't realize how much you're costing customers. Okay, I built the model and I said it's the 48th largest GDP in the world. Like the 40th biggest country in the world. That's why I called it SAP Nation, right? They didn't like that book at all. So but the other 2 books have been much more, generous, but fact-based, right? So
yeah, that's why I enjoy your work, because you're not afraid. You're sort of like me, or John Reed and the guys over at Diginomica, or there's very few people in this industry that aren't too worried about offending people, or just telling the truth and saying it like it is. And sometimes people don't like the way you talk or I talk, or people like John Reed and a few select others in the industry speak. But I think that's part of the problem with the industry. It's such an there's such an insular focus. You're so focused on yourself in this industry that a lot of times we forget to look at, well, the clients implementing technology are actually the real star of the story here. And that's something you and I talked about before we went live here today, that some things in the industry have changed dramatically, but some things have not changed. And that's one of the things that hasn't changed, but maybe it will, hopefully, over time.
And that comes out in the book where we say, this is how analysts were 10 years ago. There's a quote in the book that several people have liked, where a senior analyst says, "Sacred cows make the best hamburger." Okay.
Right. Yeah.
And we've become as analysts, actually, we've become tame. We need to call out a lot more vendors going forward.
Yeah, I think the problem, though, is that the vendors are paying for a lot of the analyst work. So it makes it difficult to be completely honest when they may not like what you have to say, if you're being too honest.
In the end, you got to be honest to the market and to you're buying. The technology buyers expect some level of, it'd be like a referee in a football game just not making the right calls just because he's worried about upsetting some sponsor, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very true. Although, there are people in the United States here that are into American football. They're convinced that the referees are favoring the Kansas City Chiefs, which is why they're in the Super Bowl. But that's a whole nother discussion. That I'm a Denver Broncos fan. And Denver Broncos are huge rivals with the Kansas City Chiefs. So.
It's funny. In the book, we have a little bit of rivalry between University of Michigan and Michigan State. So.
Oh, that's funny. My wife went to Michigan State, and she's not a Michigan fan. So that she might enjoy that.
That comes out in a couple of scenes.
Does it? Okay.
Oh God, yes. And there's also a little bit of California versus Florida rivalry. So.
Okay. So you cover a lot of ground in this book. I'm impressed. Not only impressed, anyone who writes a book is very impressive, but the fact that you're building in all this stuff on top of AI.
We had to do a lot of sidebar analysis. We had to talk to FBI agents. There's a Indian wedding in the book. We had to study all the rituals that happen in an Indian wedding, which is very colorful, but it's very, very nuanced, right? So a lot of research, nothing to do with technology. We had to do for the book.
Yeah.
The wildfire in Silicon, in California, the amount of work that firemen do to suppress fires and use aerial bombardment of flames and all that. It took a fair amount of research.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah, that's very, very cool. And here's a comment coming back to the point we were talking about earlier regarding AI being used in ERP deployments. This is from Anders on LinkedIn. Anders says, at this very moment, I'm using AI to modify SQL queries for an ERP implementation, taking the existing queries I have and asking ChatGPT to modify them for the interesting schema I'm encountering. So Anders sounds like he's on top of it in terms of using AI for his deployment.
That to me sounds like a very, very it's a great use case for what ChatGPT could do, right? Can take existing knowledge and modify it a little bit. When you try to tell it to imagine a next generation unicorn, I don't know what you're going to get, right? Especially if some bias is built into the
right
book where unicorns are evil or whatever, right? So
right. So when people are reading this book, or as you were writing this book, thinking about the audience and their reaction and what they get out of the book, what is it that you hope the audience will take away in terms of entertainment, enjoyment, or knowledge and understanding? I mean, what are some of the major hopes that you have in terms of what people take away after reading this book?
I would say 3 goals. First of all, hope they enjoy it, right? The plot, so many twists and turns, so many suspects. It'll keep them engrossed. And the earlier reviews that we've gotten have been very, very good. Okay. So enjoy the book. Put your work aside for a moment. And then maybe come back a second time and look at it as my vision of next generation buyers of technology, vendors of technology, analysts of technology. Okay. And then a minor third goal is to hopefully expose you to the world of analysts, my community, people like you and me, Eric. Hopefully it gives us a little bit more respect in the marketplace. We're a needed function. People don't know what the hell we do, right? So we don't often get the I don't want the recognition, but certainly allow us to do our job would be my request. Because you and I get a lot of pressure for you're biased or whatever. And people just throw out stuff without knowing what we go through and make our decisions. So I'd say 2.5 goals. The third one is kind of a nice to have.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see if the world of enterprise tech and consulting, being analyst, I wonder if that will ever reach the point of mainstream understanding in the same way that police officers, detectives, lawyers, doctors, like all these professions you have TV shows and movies about, but nothing about enterprise tech analysts. I wonder why that is. Maybe people aren't as interested in this stuff as.
Well, so I'm going to be humble there and say, God bless the firemen and the first responders and all that. Okay. So I don't think we'll ever reach that status in society.
Right. Yeah, you'd have
But but I would hope one or two movies are made about where an analyst is at least a bit player in a movie, because we are important to the technology sector.
Yeah, I was excited when that show. There was a show, I don't know if you ever saw it. It had Don Cheadle in it. It was called House of Lies, and it was about consulting. And it wasn't just tech consulting. It was management consultants basically, and they were going into these businesses. And it unfortunately was not a positive portrayal of our industry. It was pretty, in my opinion, it was pretty negative, but it made for good TV. So it was. I think that was on for a few seasons. So I was excited that there was at least one show that I know of that's about consulting and technology, but maybe we'll see more in the future. Maybe someone will adapt your book into a movie. You know, that'd be kind of cool.
I would welcome that.
If you need an executive producer, you know, let's talk after me. Maybe we can.
Absolutely. And like I said, it was about 600 pages. We can cut it down to 300. So there's way more in the script that can be adapted.
Okay, interesting. I think we might be onto something. Maybe we could crowd fund the financing for that book through our or of that movie through our following here.
Open to ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your plans for your next books? You know, you said you've written 10 or 11 books already. Do you have plans to write more, and what does that look like? What can we expect from you?
Well, first of all, after every book, I take a little bit of a breather and not write a book for a few months, right? These things take a lot of, they drain you. Not just writing, marketing them and so on takes effort. The next book on the docket for now is another in the SAP Nation series, okay? And because so much has changed in that particular world, actually the whole enterprise software world, if you look at the changes that have happened just in the last 2 years, right? ChatGPT, the whole generative AI model has turned the business upside down. I mean, it's not like transaction processing isn't important. In fact, we have a lot of transaction processing we haven't done, and for verticals and a lot of regions around the world and so on. But the world has become very, very focused on agentic AI. And as we bring out in the book, next wave is going to be physical AI, which is humanoid robots and so on. All that is going to change the way we do business in using technology in enterprises. So the SAP book this time is going to look at how the world of enterprise software has changed and how SAP and its competitors are responding. And if its partners are starting to adapt the automation we just talked about, right? Because that has been a sore point for a lot of SAP customers, right? Because they're expensive to implement. So that is right now on the docket.
Right. Interesting. So you're not slowing down, is what you're saying.
Well, I'm taking a breather.
Right.
Hopefully it won't be too long a breather.
Right. And actually, while we're talking here, I'm just going to drop in the chat. It won't go to all the chats, but we'll make sure to include it after the fact. But I just dropped a link in some of the chats to Amazon where you can find Vinnie's book. So I just put a page to your
Thank you.
Put a link to your page here, and we'll make sure to get it in the chat after we're done being live here for those that don't see it.
Or just go to the search bar in Amazon and type in the AI Analyst, right? And
we'll find it there. Yeah, it was easy to find. I just looked for it while we're talking here. So what? By
the way, before I move off that question, I don't just write books. I have a video channel like you, Eric. I have 2 blogs. I have an Instagram gallery. So content is constantly coming out. Much more digestible content than a 300-page book, actually.
Yeah.
So please keep following me.
What are the best ways? That's what I was going to actually ask you next. Is what are the best ways to keep up with your work? Not just this book, which we can find on Amazon, but how can we keep up with your blogs and your other research?
I usually every blog I write or every video I have, I will post a link on LinkedIn and Twitter, right? So if you follow me on those two, you will wish you probably didn't, because you will see a lot of my content show up. Links to my content will show up there.
Gotcha. Good deal. Well, good. So what are your hopes for the book? You hope that you sell a bunch of copies, that you make a difference in the industry, teach people some stuff, or what are your goals here with the book?
I mean, I'd love for you to make a movie.
I mean, we do have a sister company called Major Tom Productions that produces our content. Now, as I was saying that, I was thinking, we could actually, that could be our first full length.
Is that Major Tom as in David Bowie?
It is, yes.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, and the podcast Transformation Ground Control is another reference to David.
Oh
Bowie.
wow.
Ground Control to Major Tom.
Is there Ashes to Ashes somewhere in there too?
Yeah, it's funny. Not many people know the Ashes to Ashes follow up to Major Tom. It's kind of depressing because Major Tom turns out is the good news. He's still alive in space. For those of you that don't know the David Bowie story, or the Space Oddity story, where it's about Major Tom, he goes up into space and they lose contact with him, but you're sort of left hanging. The listener's left hanging. You don't know what happened to him. They just lost touch with him. But then he puts out a song like 10 or 15 years later called Ashes to Ashes. It's sort of a follow-up. And it's sort of like, here's an update on what's going on with Major Tom. Turns out he's alive, but the bad news is he's not doing well up in space. He's on drugs.
Yeah, it sounds like he's on some really, really interesting chemical substances.
Yeah, that you couldn't find on Earth. So only David Bowie would write a story like that. And then just another comment. William Kenny mentioned that Kristen Bell was great in that show. That was the actress. I couldn't think of her name. That was the main actress in House of Lies, which is that story, the TV show I was telling you about that's about consulting. But as far as I know, no one's made a movie yet, a full-length feature movie yet about enterprise technology or consulting or the analyst space. So maybe we'll be the first.
Let's take that offline.
Yeah, let's do.
Like I said, I think there is so much excitement about our industry. When I was writing this book, I was looking at different industries that Polestar, a fictional company, goes after, right? And I mean, if you were to just expand our horizons and go, we're not just into IT, what chemistry can we bring in? What physics can we bring in? What biology we can bring in, and so on. I mean, there's so many opportunities to just expand our products and make them far more useful to consumers and companies, right? So that's one frustration of mine with 30 plus years of Analyst is we're still stuck in terms like ERP and CRM that my colleagues at Gartner coined in the 90s, right? The world has moved on, guys. We need to expand the functionality, and we need to be doing so much more. And like I said, it's an exciting time. I mean, Trump is a crazy man, but my God, if you look at what he's unleashing just in a week, right? It's the rate of change is growing dramatically, and sometimes we just keep coming back to our old, we talk about data models that haven't evolved. We keep talking about MRP and functionality that is commoditized at this point.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's going to be an exciting time. I mean, between all the stuff that Trump's done just in his first few weeks in office, and also what's going on with DeepSeek and just OpenAI and AI in general. I mean, there's just so much changing right now, and it's actually a fun time to be in this industry, because I don't know about you, but I feel like it's always been an interesting industry to me, which is what sort of has kept me in it for so long, is that I enjoy it. But I enjoy it more now than ever, just because the technology is changing so quickly, and there's just so much unknown, untapped opportunity to look forward to.
I mean, the whole wave of humanoid robots, right? Elon Musk has launched so many satellites.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be 10x the amount of robots he releases to the world. And he's not even a player in the robotic industry. The Boston Corridor has so many robotic firms that are, just bots that can crawl, they can do backflips, and it's revolutionary, some of the stuff that's going on.
Oh, it totally is. Yeah, very, very revolutionary. And Michelle is one of the two people that won the book, and she's pulling out the David Bowie quotes now on LinkedIn. I'm feeling very scared. I think my spaceship knows the way to go. Those are two quotes from that David Bowie song about Major Tom. And she said, could be applied to agentic AI for sure. So it's true. David Bowie was a visionary for sure. And by the way, this is a David Bowie poster right here behind me. If you can see it, there's a David Bowie thing right there. But for those of you that are watching this, but I'm going to ask you one last question, Vinnie, and then I'm going to let you go because I could keep going for hours. And I know we both have our real jobs to get back to. But this is from Xenon on LinkedIn. Vinnie, curious on what you believe the next paradigm shift with AI within ERPs and CRMs are going to be. What are the key problems that can be solved with these almost legacy concept coined in the 90s? So how do you see AI and ERP and CRM and some of these older technologies coming together?
I think one of the issues I have with the technology with ERP, CRM, all the enterprise application sector is we have a lot of very good enterprise architects. We've had Hasso Plattner, Larry Ellison, Jan Baan, Parker Harris at Salesforce, brilliant enterprise architects. We don't have enough equivalent business architects, right? I went to an Amazon distribution center a few years ago. I got a tour of a distribution center, and it just blew my mind because everything was designed around let's bring work to the worker rather than have the worker walk around and find stuff and bring it and pack it and so on. Okay, so they have conveyor belts, miles of conveyor belts. They have Kiva robots that bring stuff to the worker. They have tape cutting machines that cut the precise amount of tape depending on the box to be used and all that. And the worker really is there to validate and pack, and then another set of machines takes over and applies the shipping labels and so on. Another one tells the person at the shipping dock to how exactly to pack the truck for optimal usage of the space and so on. Okay, just a fascinating use of technology to make a worker a lot more productive. Okay, and who designed that? If you're told an enterprise architect, I'm not picking on Larry Ellison, but if Jeff Bezos had called Larry and said, "Hey, Larry, I need a new warehouse system," he would have taken his old stuff, put it on the cloud, and said, "Here." He wouldn't have rethought the whole thing, right? It took a business architect to rethink what the warehouse should look, next generation warehouse should look like. I think that is that to me is a big opportunity, both for CRM and ERP. We have so many new vertical opportunities, so many new global nuances that we need to introduce. We should be getting more functional architects involved in the mix, because otherwise, we'll try to use LLMs and so on without really bringing these new business concepts into play. That to me, I think is a big weakness right now in the industry. So,
yeah,
long answer to your question, but
no, that'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because I think you're right. The technologies that we're using today enterprise-wide, for the most part, is pretty outdated. Even though we're moving to the cloud and we're adding AI into these solutions, it's still sort of the same outdated mentality of how to design and build and deploy these systems.
And as a result, if you look at the first set of use cases that have come out of generative AI from the Salesforces and the Workdays and the SAPs and so on, if you look at our income statement, right? SG&A is something we have been doing for a long time. So we can get good HR use cases. Yeah, it can generate better employee descriptions. Or Salesforce has agents that can do better customer service. None of them is doing anything operational, right? For operational, we need domain expertise for that industry, for that process in that industry, and we need the data. Enterprise software does not have either, okay? So till they get there, and you can't do that without having the functional expertise to go in and convince somebody, hey, look, give me some of the pharmaceutical molecular data, right? You got to talk to them in a different language than LLMs and GPUs and all that, right? So It's
Yeah.
I want the industry to become much more functionally smart in many, many new areas.
Yeah. Makes me wonder if custom development and more customized, tailored solutions are going to become
Well,
more
if you don't do it, actually, customers are going to do it themselves. Custom
yeah.
development has become a lot more. It's become cheaper and a lot more, you know, like like the the SQL modification that ChatGPT can do. Right? You can generate code a lot more efficiently now. Customers will do it themselves, and I tell people, I go, when I started my career, it was very difficult to sell package applications. Customers, you would build everything. No. We can do it ourselves. And we went through a nice wave where they've been buying functionality from enterprise vendors. We're approaching a pendulum swing again where they're going to custom develop a lot more functionality.
Yeah.
And if that happens, we could accelerate the demise of, Satya has already said, we're seeing the death of SaaS and enterprise apps because he
Mhm.
thinks agents are going to replace them, right? So, but yeah, it's a bit of a brag from Satya because the agents need domain expertise and enterprise vendors don't have it. So,
Yeah, and it's if you can get a really strong business architect like you were talking about, business architects and people that really understand operations and business processes and workflows. Now all of a sudden those people I feel like are going to become even more relevant because you're not so dependent on technology development capabilities because you can use AI for a lot of that. So I imagine if you could, companies that could get really strong business architecture functions within their businesses, they would be in a good position to potentially create their own software and create a competitive advantage. And I think for once we could actually see enterprise IT or enterprise applications become a true competitive advantage without having to overinvest in technology or worry about it becoming outdated or obsolete.
the
As
flip side is you don't need complex enterprise apps. You could
yeah,
take platforms and use those domain experts to build their own applications. It's a risky time. I see a very risky time for enterprise apps over the next few years.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you, Vinnie. I appreciate you being here today. It was a great conversation, and thank you to the audience for the great questions. And congratulations to Michelle and Alcinda, who both received a free copy of the book. And if you'd like to buy that book again, you can go to Amazon and search for the AI Analyst and search for Vinnie's name as well, and you'll find it there. So hope you enjoy the book and hope you enjoyed that conversation. So, Darian, we just spoke with Vinnie about his new book, and we talked about a lot of other stuff too outside of his book. But what were your thoughts and takeaways from that conversation?
Yeah, it was a great conversation. I loved hearing about his book. I'm even more excited to watch the movie when you guys develop that.
Yep.
I think that will be a great watch. But I do
No,
have a
no
couple
pressure
of
there for us.
yeah, exactly. I do have a couple of follow-up questions related to the conversation. One being, you guys discussed how analysts have become almost tame and less critical of vendors. From your perspective, Eric, how can analysts or consultants balance staying honest while maintaining a strong vendor relationship?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think it's really hard I'll admittedly answer this from a biased perspective because, third stage consulting, we're independent, we're tech agnostic, and we don't just say it. It's actually part of our business model in terms of not accepting money or payments from vendors. Vendors don't hire us to do work. They don't give us kickbacks or commissions to recommend their product to anyone. So it's easier for us to just speak the truth and speak from a client's perspective without having to worry too much about whether a vendor might get offended by what we say. For example, there's a lot of times I'll put out videos where, the reviews of different technologies, and I always try to talk about the pros and the cons. And that's true for any system. I mean, any discussion I ever have about technology, especially when it's on camera, on video, you're going to hear me talk about these are the things that are great about the product. Here are the things that are weaknesses, and you've got to figure out what balance is going to work for you. So not having money exchange hands is probably the easiest way, but the analyst model, I think it's kind of broken because it's, on one hand, you need the ecosystem supporting you as an analyst. And when I say ecosystem, I mean software vendors, all the system integrators and consultants that are aligned with the software vendors or represent the software vendors. I mean, that's a majority of the ERP and enterprise tech space are these biased players that focus on one specific technology, and their job is to promote one specific technology. these are the same people paying analysts to provide sort of an objective, big picture, bird's eye view of the enterprise tech space. And so I think that's a conflict right there. So I don't know how you do it, to be honest. I think the analyst model is completely broken. I think the only way to really get around it is to say, if we're an analyst firm and we want to be truly objective, the only way to truly do that is to non-technology providers are your customers. So in other words, it's the end customers, the end clients. Though if those are your only paying customers, then your analyst work is untethered from what software vendors want you to say. Then it becomes more about what your clients are looking for. What's the value they want? What's the honesty and truth and transparency they're looking for? And you can provide that. Now it's easier said than done, because once you do that, now suddenly I don't want to say you're an enemy of the software vendors, but you're not on their side. It's sort of like software vendors just have this weird way of thinking that, well, if you're not on our side, then you're against us. And sometimes vendors think that about us at third stage. They think that we're against them because we're not with them per se. We're not there to represent their product and talk about how great it is and recommend it every single time a client asks what the best system is out there. If we're not towing the line, then we're not on their side. And so it's just the way it works. I don't know why it is. I couldn't tell you the whole sociology behind it all, but that does seem to be the unfortunate reality. So I think just cutting the financial incentive to be biased, I think that's the biggest thing you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. And one more follow-up question / topic that you guys touched on is the idea of proprietary data protection and ethical breaches was definitely mentioned during this conversation. How do you see these risks playing out in ERP implementations where sensitive business data is often at stake?
Well, it's always been a risk because, anytime you're bringing in third parties to mess with your data and, cleanse it and map it to new systems and migrate it to your new systems, you're inherently exposing yourself to a certain amount of risk. But AI is sort of opening it up to AI and the cloud, I'd say, are both exposing us to additional cybersecurity threats. On one hand, you could say, well, these big tech providers are much more likely to provide a more robust, more sophisticated cybersecurity regimen, which is true. But these big tech providers, AI providers, cloud providers, they're also becoming bigger targets for cybersecurity criminals. So they've got a bigger bullseye on them now because they're housing so much sensitive information, especially, you think about these cloud providers or these AI providers that are dealing with government data or, proprietary trade secrets. I mean, that's pretty appealing stuff if you're a cybersecurity criminal or if you're trying to steal intellectual property. I mean, suddenly the cloud and AI is very appealing. So you're going to go after these big providers. So I think the robust protection is more sophisticated from these big tech providers because they've got more money, more R&D behind it, more resources to protect the data. But on the flip side, sort of countering that advantage is the fact that now they've become more of a bullseye, and there's more potential attacks happening with these big companies. So I don't know. It'd probably be an oversimplification to say that it's a wash in the end, but I think the advantage you get from having a big tech provider might be somewhat muted by the fact that there's now more of a bullseye on them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to bring it back to AI, I'm excited to get into our next section or topic of the day, which is 10 AI features that will revolutionize your supply chain.
Yes, this is going to be based on a YouTube video I published recently. We're going to talk about the 10 use cases that we're seeing recently with supply chain management. And what we wanted to do in this video and in this next segment is talk about not only what could be with AI and supply chain management, but what we're actually seeing. Here's some examples of how we're seeing AI being used in the world of supply chain management. So it's meant to be somewhat forward-looking, but also looking grounded at the present. What are the realities of how supply chain managers are actually using AI and starting to use AI right now? And hopefully this gives you some ideas to think about how you might embed AI into your organization. So I'll be curious to hear your feedback as well. But we're going to play you that clip here in just a minute. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I'm excited to announce the release of our 2025 Digital Transformation Report. It's available now on the Third Stage Consulting website, www.thirdstage-consulting.com. This report gives you an unbiased technology agnostic insight to help you optimize your organization's projects for success. Get your copy today using the QR code in front of me or on our website.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 207. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm here with Darian Chwialkowski, and you can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. This is the podcast that's tech agnostic, covers everything you need to know about digital transformation strategy, including people, process, technology, and everything else you need to know to make your initiative successful. And show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients with their digital transformations. If you'd like to learn more about us, I've included my contact information below. And our next segment here is about AI and supply chain management. We want to play you this clip from my YouTube channel where we talk about artificial intelligence and how we're seeing it start to be used in supply chain management. So let's roll this clip and we'll come back and talk about it here in just a few minutes. The first big opportunity that AI has to really help supply chain management, help supply chain managers be more effective, is in demand planning. When we look at forecasting and planning demand, this is a big area of opportunity for organizations. First, it helps to understand why forecasting and planning is so important. If you think about supply chain management, everything we do within supply chain management is focused on satisfying customer demand. So we have to anticipate when we think customers are going to need certain things, whether it's raw materials or sub-assemblies or finished goods or some combination of all the above. And we have to figure out not only when do those products need to be done on the shop floor or procured in our warehouse, but we also have to figure out how we're going to get it to the customer at the time we've promised. There's a lot that goes into forecasting and planning. You have your internal data, so you have your historic data that you can be looking at, and AI can help you analyze historically how has customer demand evolved and fluctuated, and what's the seasonality throughout the year. But you can also look at external factors as well, and this is where it gets really interesting in how AI might be able to help, because a lot of organizations and supply chain managers use tribal knowledge and just their gut instinct on what's happening in the marketplace to try and adjust their forecast and plan for the customer demand. So for example, if we know that the economy is going to grow at a slower pace next quarter, for example, that may have some sort of material impact on our forecast and plan. And rather than using tribal knowledge, we can be using AI to analyze the historic data we have as well as external data points such as macroeconomic indicators. We could also be looking at weather patterns or potential supply chain disruptions, other things that might affect how customers' demand might be impacted for our finished goods or our end product. So look for AI to really revolutionize how supply chain managers look at customer demand and the forecasts and plans that go along with that. Inventory is one of the biggest costs that a lot of supply chain intensive organizations have. You think about all that inventory you're sitting on in your warehouse and your multiple distribution centers throughout the world, and that's a lot of money. That's money that's on your balance sheet. Those are assets that are sitting there that could be generating cash. If you have too much inventory, then your costs are too high and you're not generating cash flow fast enough. So if we can optimize inventory, that's ideal. We can find that balance between making sure we don't have too much inventory and we're sitting on wasted inventory or potentially obsolete inventory, but we also want to make sure we have enough inventory to where we can satisfy customer demand when they need it. We also want to know that we can plan for stockouts and that sort of thing. So if you look at AI and what AI can do here, AI now can take these mass amounts of data, looking at inventory levels, looking at potentially obsolete or slow moving inventory, and it can help us understand better what some of those trends and patterns are, and it can help us anticipate where we might need to invest more time and money in our inventory and perhaps liquidate other areas or spend less time and money in other inventory areas. So AI can truly change and transform the way we optimize inventory, and this has been a challenge for decades now, despite the evolutions in technology, and hopefully AI will be a way that we can start to really manage and optimize inventory levels. Most supply chains we work with involve multiple systems, multiple data sources, both tribal and centralized data sources. And that makes it very difficult to have real visibility into what's going on throughout the supply chain. With AI, even if you have disparate systems, you're going to be able to look at multiple data sources now and understand and have better visibility across the enterprise. Not only do you have access to this data because of AI, but now you can have a conversation with AI to get to that information easier. You can ask AI questions around things that you want to know about your supply chain. You can find out things like which distribution center has the highest inventory level, or which SKUs are most at risk of experiencing a stock out based on current inventory levels and current demand forecasts. There's a lot of different things that you're going to have visibility into that you may not have today. And it's really a great opportunity for us to rethink how we use technology to get better visibility into supply chains. And better data, better visibility, better understanding, better information, that really is the holy grail of effective supply chain management. And that's where AI is going to really help revolutionize supply chain management as we know it today. With the better understanding and the better visibility to supply chains that AI affords us, now we can start to take things a little bit further and really look at how we're pricing our products. If there's a way that we could be pricing things to be more competitive, to potentially undercut competitors, or perhaps demand is so high for a certain product or a certain SKU that maybe we need to actually raise our prices, AI can be a great way to anticipate some of these potential shifts in the way our pricing should be. And the way most pricing works right now is organizations will look at their cost structure and add some sort of margin on top of that, or they'll go with what they think the market will bear based on human knowledge, which is always imperfect. But now with AI, we can look at things that we hadn't considered before. We can anticipate potential spikes in demand, which might suggest that we should be raising our price. Or we can anticipate potentially hyper-competitive situations where it might make sense to lower our price. And AI can be a great way to help us think through and understand where some of these pricing optimization opportunities are. And that's something we oftentimes don't think about when we think about supply chain management. Oftentimes we're focused on cost, inventory optimization, understanding demand, but we're not always focused on what the right price is that we should be charging for any given product. So AI has the opportunity to truly change the way we think about pricing and help us understand and respond to pricing opportunities in a way that we never have been able to in the past. Suppliers are a key part of any supply chain, and finding the right supplier and managing that supplier is very important, obviously. And there's supply chain management systems out there that allow us to track suppliers and their performance and scorecards and things of that nature, but it doesn't always give us the information we need to anticipate where challenges might lie. If we have quality issues with a certain supplier, we want to be alerted as soon as possible. If we have sole dependency on a single supplier for a critical raw material that would be very disruptive if that supplier wasn't able to satisfy demand, we need to recognize what those situations are. And when there's geopolitical risk that's happening in the world today here in the 2020s, we need to understand what suppliers are at risk as a result of that geopolitical risk, especially in a global supply chain. So AI has a way for us, and it provides us more complete access to information and understanding of what the supplier situation is, which ones we should be selecting, which is going to be the best for any given raw material, and which ones might be at risk, and help us identify where we might need to diversify our use of that particular supplier. So look to AI to really change the way we think about supplier selection and sourcing. When we look at the procurement aspect of supply chain management, that's one of the most important things, because there's not only so much money being spent to procure raw materials or finished goods, whatever the case may be, for your supply chain, but there's also the opportunity, either through human error or more nefarious behavior, for there to be fraud in the procurement process. If you think about it, for some organizations, I could create a vendor named Eric Kimberling, and I could go ahead and pay Eric Kimberling $1 million for some raw material that we never received. Now, obviously, you want to set up the right security profiles and things of that nature to make sure that you don't enable the same person to create a vendor and pay the same vendor without any sort of oversight or checks and balance. But AI has a way for us to proactively flag potential fraudulent situations. It has a way of understanding what's normal and what's abnormal in different data patterns in terms of how we procure raw materials and other indirect materials as well. And so AI can be a very powerful internal audit mechanism to help us identify potential issues when it comes to procurement, in particular fraud. So look to AI to really change the way we think about fraud and risk management as it relates to the procurement process. For supply chains that are very capital intensive, that involve expensive machinery, expensive trucks and fleets, things of that nature, predictive maintenance is a big deal, because you want to make sure you're maintaining those assets and you're getting the most out of those assets for as long as you can. And the key here is you don't want to spend too much money on maintenance, but you don't want to spend so little that things start to break and it creates disruptions in your supply chain. So AI has a way for us to more intelligently anticipate where the needs are, where the potential risks are within predictive maintenance. If you think about, for example, a piece of machinery that is particularly stressed or is experiencing a big spike in usage, a human may not recognize that or may not recognize the increased need for maintenance and repair on that machine, but AI might flag that and say, hey, this is an abnormal use of this piece of equipment, so there should be more inspection happening or more maintenance and repair happening. So we look to maintenance and repair. That's a big opportunity for us to really optimize how we're managing our assets to make sure that we're getting the most out of the assets without stressing the asset so much that it breaks and creates a disruption to our supply chain. Warehouses and distribution centers are really the lifeblood of a lot of supply chains, because they're not only bringing in raw materials, but they're also stocking finished goods, and they're shipping those finished goods to customers from those distribution centers in many cases. And so there's a lot of opportunity to be more efficient. There's a lot of opportunity to better manage inventory, and there's a lot of opportunity to more quickly turn inventory in those warehouses. And when you combine AI with the use of robotics and Internet of Things and other things that are already happening in warehouses, now that convergence of those types of technologies create an opportunity for us to create smart warehouses. We can now really optimize the location of inventory. We can optimize the flow of inventory, the flow of goods. We can optimize which inventory levels we need to have, which we talked about earlier in this video. And it's a great way for us to really create this smart warehouse using artificial intelligence combined with robotics, Internet of Things, and other trends in the industry. So look to AI to really fast track this whole concept of smart warehouses. And it's another opportunity for us to become even more efficient and effective in our warehouse management function. We talked earlier in this video about supplier management and procurement and how we can better manage those suppliers. And within that, there's also the aspect of contracts. When we think about contracts we have with suppliers, there's different terms and conditions, there's different criteria that need to be met. And if we can use AI to flag potential non-compliance or potential issues with the contracts, that's something that is a big pain point for a lot of supply chains today. You think of an organization that has hundreds or maybe even thousands of suppliers with thousands of different contracts and terms and conditions, it can be overwhelming for any supply chain management person or a procurement professional to manage all those different moving parts and details. So AI can be a great way to leverage and understand where there might be contractual issues or potential opportunities to renegotiate with customers and suppliers. So look to procurement and contract management in particular to be totally transformed by AI here in the near future as well. Organizations that manage their own fleet of trucks and other transportation logistics find that route optimization is very important. Fuel costs are high, The cost of maintaining the assets are high. So anything you can do to optimize the routes and make sure that they're being as efficient as possible and how they get the product out to the market in that last mile in particular is going to be extremely important. So if we can optimize the routes of our transportation management, that's going to save us in fuel costs. It's going to save us in maintenance and repair. It's going to save us in capital investment. And there's a lot of upside potential to optimizing routes. Now, to be fair, there's been a lot of technology for decades now that help optimize transportation routes. So this isn't anything new, but AI really allows us to take it to another level, and it adds a whole another layer of intelligence and efficiency optimization to that. So look to AI to also improve the way we handle transportation management and route optimization in particular here in the coming years. So I hope this has given you some guidance and some ideas on how AI might transform your supply chain in the future. There's a lot more here we haven't talked about, but these are 10 that I think are particularly compelling. In some cases, we've already seen organizations start to deploy some of these use cases. In other cases, they're in the early stages of thinking through these things. And in other cases, these are just new capabilities that are just coming out in the marketplace. And this top 10 list is bound to change over time. So it'll be fun to revisit this here in the coming years. But in the meantime, hopefully this has given you some things to think about. So that was our clip of 10 use cases of how AI is being used in supply chain management. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that conversation, Darian?
Yeah, like you said, not only is it stuff that is going to happen in the future, but things we're seeing right now happening. And I think that's really interesting to dive into. One question I have about that, then we could maybe look into the next 5 years, let's say. What is the area of supply chain, like demand forecasting, inventory management, logistics, that you think AI will disrupt the most?
It's a great question. I mean, there's so many areas I think it will disrupt, but I think honestly, demand planning is probably the biggest opportunity, the biggest low-hanging fruit. Everything in supply chain management is complicated. It's complex because you're dealing with so many different moving parts. You're dealing with raw materials. You're dealing with the distribution of those raw materials, the transportation logistics. You're dealing with the warehouse management when the raw materials come in. You're dealing with the manufacturing, the distribution, the order taking. There's just so much stuff. Supply chains are very complex. That's why the shifts we're seeing in the world of supply chain now are so extreme, because it's taken so long to build these global supply chains. And now a lot of countries, including the US, where you and I are based, but other countries as well, are becoming more nationalist. They're becoming more focused on bringing home or onshoring back, some of their production and some of their supply chain functions, largely because they saw what the downside risk is of having an overly global supply chain. So that's why these changes to supply chain management in general are so extreme, because it's such a complex network. So having said that, I think there's tons of opportunity, but I think the biggest opportunity for AI to make the biggest difference is with demand planning, because demand planning is all based on a really hard to predict behavior from consumers or your end customers. So trying to anticipate what they're going to do based on not only historical data that you have internally, but also looking externally at what's happening with different economies or weather patterns, or even exchange rates, or what treasury departments are doing in terms of interest rates. There's all these different variables that can affect demand for your product or service. So if you can use AI to understand all these external and internal factors better than any human could, I think that's probably the biggest area where you could see the biggest lift.
Yeah, absolutely. And one final question, I want to get into, I guess, the human element of this. With AI taking over many analytical tasks and other things, how do you see the role of supply chain professionals evolving?
Well, I think to be a good supply chain professional, you're going to have to understand enterprise technology, but in particular AI and data science. I think if you have a supply chain background and you combine it with AI and or data science, I think that's a super, I say deadly combination, but I mean it in a good way, not a bad thing, but deadly as in you're going to be unstoppable, and you're going to kill it in your career or whatever. So I think that's what I see coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, some great use cases in that last segment there for what's going on in the supply chain world.
Yeah, exciting stuff for sure. And we're curious to see how that unfolds, and love to hear from you too, the audience. Any thoughts you have on how you think AI is going to affect supply chain management, or just businesses in general. I'd love to hear your comments in the chat. So be sure to drop those in the comments here wherever you're listening and watching here today. So thank you for a great episode here, Darian. I appreciate you being here and appreciate the audience being here. We've got a great set of guests coming up in the coming weeks, so be sure to stick around for that. We've got next week, we'll have Aaron Patterson from the Third Stage Consulting team. He's going to be on talking about the Matrix ERP project in the UK. It's a massive, huge ERP project. We're going to talk about what that means, what it looks like, and what we think will happen with that project. So be sure to stick around for that. We're going to talk about IT vendor management with Scott Bickey from Infotech here in the coming weeks. We've got a lot of great guests coming up. We've also have Jan Bond, who's going to be on in a few weeks talking about composable ERP. So stick around and be sure to keep up with this podcast because we'll be covering a lot of great topics with different guests here in the coming weeks. Again, you can go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to subscribe to whichever platform you prefer. You can also go listen or watch to past episodes as well. So go to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And in the meantime, we'll hope to see you here again next week. Have a great week, and we'll see you on the next episode of Transformation Ground Control. Take care.